Samurai Shodown is a specific fighting game that is sort of limited in mechanics. This game has more defensive mechanics than it has offensive mechanics, but you do get like a variety of supers that do a ton of damage. What balances Samurai Shodown's mechanical spectrum is the fact that your attacks do so much damage in this game. Things hurt so much that it makes up for defensive mechanics. So if you have a bunch of defensive mechanics that can offer for cool and hype moments like parries or just defends that lead into counters and some of the really cool stuff, the defense mechanics technically become offense mechanics because your defense mechanic kicks in and then you do an offensive attack. Whap, you've lost 70% of your life. That's really satisfying. And then in general, I think the game's hit-by-hit combat is actually satisfying. So I like landing a heavy hit on somebody. It just gives you like that, like Unga, I'm gonna whack the shit out of you with, you know, Genjiro or Haomaru, and it just looks visceral. Like, and I think it's just a nice balance of hit stun, blood effects, and hit spark that all makes it feel very good, right? But Sam Show remains very traditional. Like, it's a simple fighting game. Like, there's not a ton of super high level stuff that you kind of have to learn. There's not a lot of crazy mobility in the game. There's not a lot of crazy combo potential. There's going to be some combos that'll obviously be hard or setups that'll be hard to do. But for the way the game is designed, it's designed so that the barrier of entry is pretty damn low. It's a good starting game for almost anyone that wants to get into a fighting game. However, here's where the real talk comes in. It doesn't mean that you'll do good. And I think Sam Show's a unique situation because this game's trying to remain as traditional as possible to the old Samurai Showdowns, which it does, which is actually very good. However, there is definitely a modern trend in a lot of recent fighting games that take existing mechanics from previous entries in its series, and we're gonna tone it down. We're going to make it less about combos. We're gonna make it less about the options you have. We're gonna make it less things that you have to worry about. And the design philosophy behind that, according to like developers, of course, is that, well, if there's less difficult things for our players to worry about, they're going to be able to get better at our fighting game faster. They're going to be more interested and engaged to play our fighting game longer. I'm gonna tell you right now, this isn't the case. This is an absolute myth. Fighting game accessibility is a myth, and this is a follow-up to a conversation that I was watching on Ultra Chen, where James Chen and Ultra David were talking about a conversation that Momochi was having, and Momochi specifically was talking about how this exact thing, that this whole habit that a lot of fighting game developers have, where the previous entries in the series, they sort of tone down those entries in the series so that people, for the sake of getting people to come in, it doesn't work. It actually has no history of ever making its audience happy or specifically working for the sake of sales. And that's the point. The whole point isn't to expand fighting game scenes specifically, to make more people enter a tournament. The point is to take whatever copy of a fighting game you have, to take this thing and get it into the hands of someone that is willing to exchange $60 for this fucking thing, so that they can go on and have that on their shelf. The whole point is to make sales. I've been talking about this since 2016. The biggest one was that Marvel Infinite was coming out, and we were really worried that MVCI changing to a 2v2 game, not being a 3v3 game, them sort of taking out assists, we were like, oh man, they are going to neuter this game. And luckily for anyone that's played Marvel Infinite, that really isn't the case. MVCI is crazy in a completely different kind of way than it was from the previous, but I was absolutely worried about that. And I had a conversation kind of saying that lowering the skill barrier of a fighting game isn't what sells units. There's a very vocal majority of people that were mad about Street Fighter 4 has one-link combos everywhere. All the best players in the world do these one-link combos, and they're impossible to do. I can never be good at Street Fighter 4 because of one-link combos. This is what you heard from a lot of people that wanted to be good at Street Fighter 4. Little do they know, that's not what makes you good at Street Fighter 4. An understanding of core fundamentals of matchups is actually what makes you good at a fighting game. That's really what makes you good at a fighting game. So that's specifically that situation where they're listening to these players that have this very vocal minority opinion that these high-level mechanics or these high-level strategies that people are doing that I can't do is the reason I'm losing. That is definitely not the reason you're losing. Absolutely isn't. Because if you were a player that really loved whatever fighting game you're playing and you wanted to get good at it, you would learn how to do it. You would just learn how to do it. I wanted to get good, just as an example, I wanted to get good at Third Strike because I saw the Daigo parry. That was like the moment where I was like, I am going to dedicate all my time to this game because I want to do cool shit like that. Was I good at it immediately? Hell no. It took months of playing the game, a shit ton of losing all the time before I could even consistently get out barely any parries at all. And Third Strike's a difficult game as an example. However, the theme for a lot of fighting games now is the fact that we need to cater to these players because that's the way we get more players. The mechanics is what the problem was with the previous game. So now the mechanics are going to bring people in. This is absolutely not true. I can tell you as somebody that has been in a situation with a lot of different people and seen a lot of different audiences play fighting games, and the reason people play fighting games or watch fighting games, and I get to hear them and engage with them on a daily situation, I can tell you that's not the case. Some people, yes, some people will be like, oh, that's cool. I'm happy this is the way it is. However, for the very, very, very large majority, the moving a unit from one hand to the other in the exchange of $60, your fighting game mechanics aren't going to sell people on games. And the other greatest example is the new Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers Ultimate expands on the mechanics of Smash Brothers for Wii U. It is technically a deeper mechanical fighting game than the previous one. They added a bunch of competitive elements to Smash for Switch, like Smash Ultimate, compared to the previous game. And guess what? Game is ridiculously successful. And it's not because of its mechanics. It's ridiculously successful because it did one big thing. Everyone was in it. It did another huge thing. We're expanding on the playable modes you have in the game. Then another huge thing. There's the most stages in video game history. Truly, if you want to move units, and I'm being as honest to fighting game developers as possible. If anyone is listening to this and they're developing fighting games, either if you are an independent developer or a big developer from like Bandai Namco or anything like that, whoever might be listening to this, toning down mechanics has never had a history of working out for fighting games, of expanding its audience. It just doesn't. So, I mean, yeah, the SNK guys are here, which I appreciate because KOF 14 was super fun. And I enjoy Samsho because it remains traditional. There's still difficult things to do in this game, which I do like. However, I think fighting game devs need to focus on one thing more than anything in their fighting games. And if you want to appeal towards casuals, that is LOL content. Like, you actually need to have as many characters as possible. People like seeing a whole bunch of characters. Characters sell fighting games. Stages and graphics, to be frank, those things are very important for selling a fighting game. If a game has a huge roster and a bunch of stages, but it looks like it's on the previous generation, no one's going to be happy. If it has a combination of all three of those things and a nice balance, people are going to be pretty happy. And people are going to want to invest in that. But if you are also to tell them, yo, guess what? Our game has all these characters, it's got all these stages, but we also changed the gameplay for all this stuff. I almost guarantee you, very few people are going to look at the gameplay spot, people that are going to buy it, and buy it for the gameplay reasons. But if you tone down your game, this is the, do I have a great example for this? If you actually have a game that chooses to change its mechanics drastically in a different but more engaging way, which is what Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite did, in my opinion, the gameplay for that game's amazing, but it didn't translate to sales because it obviously lacked in the things that make fighting games important for sales on a casual level: graphics, presentation, and characters. So that makes perfect sense why that didn't do well. And there has been quite a few fighting games recently that are really focusing on We want to make things as simple as possible. We want our players not to be frustrated. We don't want them to have to worry about doing big combos. We don't have to have them worry about learning these advanced mechanics. You pretty much know everything within the first hour. And the reason this is a myth for bringing players in is because as the result of you making your game simpler to play, you're not just making it simpler for casual players. You're making it just as simple for the experts. You're making the experts who are already versed in high-level fundamentals. They're already versed in understanding matchups 10 times faster than a casual player that might want to get better. They're already versed with the information of the previous games and how that might apply towards the next game, even though the mechanics are different. You're making it just as easy. The skill gap being lowered makes it just as easy for the better players to beat up the new players. And you might think immediately, oh, but now the new players have access to do every combo, every like simpler combo. They have access to do all this other stuff now, just like the expert players. They should do just as good. It's not the truth, because the new players don't understand what the hell neutral even means. They don't understand what matchups even mean. They look at a tier list and immediately think, no matter what happens, no matter, this tier list is rock solid, and that's everything that is a fighting game. This is what I was talking about tier lists previously in fighting games, where the people that use tier lists in that way are the ones that would benefit the least from it. And those players, while tier lists are absolutely, yes, people are like, but Texas says tier lists don't exist. No, they do. Fighting games absolutely have tiers. It just shouldn't dictate whether or not you should play that character, because there's a good chance that for the people that are looking for that information, it doesn't benefit you specifically. So I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about them, but I'm also talking about you. So I completely agree, and I've been preaching this for about 3 years now. I am in the firm boat, a firm boat, a boat that is made of solid steel and somehow floats, that fighting games shouldn't focus on lowering its mechanics or making the characters do less things. Fighting games should focus on the mechanics being satisfying. It should focus on things feeling good. It should focus on things being fun. Fighting games should be designed like they are video games. To the same degree where you start off God of War and you only have so much at your disposal and things that you know how to do. But then by the end of it, you're throwing axes and flipping shit, and your son is doing backflips and arrows are flying everywhere, because that is the natural progression of a video game. It's daunting when you see someone at a high level doing that stuff and you're like, whoa, I don't want to have to worry about this. I remember feeling that when I saw Killer Instinct 2, after playing KI1 back in like 1995, I knew everything there was about Killer Instinct 1, and I was freaked out by KI2 because it was daunting. It was different. I was like, no, I don't want to deal with this. But then eventually I played it and I'm like, you just get used to it. It is a video game. You're going to figure things out. It's going to naturally come to you over time, just like regular other games. I don't think someone says, is Sam Show dumbed down? Sam Show isn't specifically dumbed down. It's actually traditional. Samurai Shodown has always been like this. It's just that now there's even more defensive options and even more offensive options. Things do even more damage now. I personally think Samurai Shodown has a nice balance, because there's a very specific gray area here. You have your game that's like super simplified, and then your very complicated game. I like to use a very complicated game like Guilty Gear. Guilty Gear Xrd, an incredible fighting game. Fighting games that are like a fighting game that's designed for like veteran fighting game players, and it's just amazing to look at. It's amazing to play. It takes a lot. It's not easy to be good at. Although you take another game, and that one there's a lot of mechanics in a game like Guilty Gear that you got to get used to. But then you take a game that is not so mechanically deep, like Tekken, for example. Tekken doesn't have a ton of mechanics. They introduced rage arts, they introduced rage drives, but the core fundamentals of Tekken still come down to character knowledge, spacing, movement, and execution. So the reason Tekken 7 makes everyone so happy is that not every match of Tekken 7 looks the same. Tekken 7 hits this fine line of, well, we want to appeal towards casuals a bit more with this game. And they're like, we should add these supers. Yes, absolutely. Rage arts are incredibly better at adding mechanics that'll appeal towards someone to get like a comeback mechanic. It absolutely is. But they're still unsafe on block. They're not like as crazy as Fatal Blows in Mortal Kombat. And Tekken, what I'm saying, hits that balance, where you still have to be incredibly good at movement, to master that game. You still have to be incredibly good at understanding all the matchups of all the characters. You still need the execution of landing the proper combo that's going to lead to a wall setup, much less getting to the wall and executing the proper wall combo, or the proper side side sway. Like, there's so much mechanical depth to Tekken at a high level that isn't really there when you start off. You start off, you're just like, everyone complains, oh, Tekken's 50-50, I have to guess everywhere. And that's not what Tekken's about. Like, Tekken is completely a different game than guessing whether or not they're going to go low. So that's what's great. Tekken has done something that most fighting game devs should try to do, which is to not lose the essence of their previous game, but still try to casualize it in some ways. And what did they do? They didn't just add rage arts and rage drives. They added new visual stuff. So now, when you get close matches, you get this badass spinning effect. You get slow-mo and stuff like that. That is the proper way to do it. And I honestly feel that MVCI was a good way to do it as well. And it wasn't perfect in its execution and launch. But that's a unique opinion. But I also feel another great example is Killer Instinct. Killer Instinct was a fighting game that went in with its design, copying or mimicking a lot of things that take place in Third Strike and Street Fighter 4. But they wanted to make it so that new players can do combos, that combos were easy to do, but they also added levels. So when you have combos in fighting games, yeah, easy combos, auto combos, I think are fine. I think people should be satisfied by seeing a combo and just mashing the mute button on their remote controller and getting a combo. Sure, I don't care. That shouldn't be what your focus is. Your focus should be the next better thing, what you should be striving to do after that. There has to be a goal in mind. There needs to be reasons for you to get better at something. And as long as there is that, which absolutely exists in Tekken, which absolutely exists in Killer Instinct, that is definitely an important thing. So whenever I go back and play Tekken, when I go back and play KI, it's one of those games that is deeply satisfying because it still has things that I have yet to learn. It still has stuff that is difficult for me to execute or setups that are hard to do. And someone asked about Dragon Ball FighterZ. I absolutely feel this way on Dragon Ball FighterZ, but Dragon Ball FighterZ does have combo execution. But one of the things that definitely bugs me about the game is that the auto combo is usually very good for a lot of characters. And the fact that they took away the game's movement and mobility with super dashes, I loved it at first, but over time it became very grating, especially in an online environment. It just wasn't fun anymore. So, all things considered, there's a fine line. There's an absolute fine line when it comes to having your fighting game being dumbed down and obviously taking mechanics from its previous games and just removing that for the sake of just introducing new players. And that's a myth. That accessibility thing is a myth. You can make your fighting game more accessible by adding more characters, by making it look better, by adding more stages, by making better trailers for it. You can also make your fighting game more accessible by having its mechanics not be specifically difficult to do, but be satisfying. It should be fun. Things should be fun. You should be excited. There should be you should figure out what you're going for. Like, the tone of the game needs to emulate exactly what you're going for. And there should be satisfying things, and mobility is a big one. Having the character move around in cool ways is a big thing that's tough to understand and tough to execute. So, to follow up the conversation that I sort of watched on Ultra 10 TV, where they were talking about Momochi, one of the best footsie players in fighting game history. I do agree. I think fighting games need to stop toning down mechanics for the sake of introducing new players. It doesn't work. It doesn't have a history of working for sales at all. And you're not going to make your fighting game for the sake of not sales. You need to sell units. That's important. So I only hope that fighting game developers in the future, and this is absolutely, I'm kind of speaking directly to the guys at SNK, especially with KOF 14. I'm speaking directly to the guys at Capcom with their future games that are going to be coming in Street Fighter 6 or whatever the hell they're working on. I'm speaking directly to Bandai Namco and whatever fighting games they make in the future. I'm speaking directly to Arc System Works after playing like Grand Blue Fantasy, and I think Grand Blue's really good, but it just lacks excitement because you just do the same thing over and over and over again. I want to love that game because it looks incredible, and I do enjoy playing it, but is it going to be the game that I'll come back and play like 2 years down the line? It's kind of hard to say. It's kind of hard to say if I'm going to be doing that because it just doesn't... There's nothing captivating me about its mechanics immediately. And that goes to say a lot of the things that... I like combos in fighting games, right? Combos are fun. I think they're just fun. However, some combos on some characters, not so fun. Some combos in some situations in games can be usually better to do shorter combos. But my favorite game of all time, my favorite fighting game of all time, is a fighting game that reliably uses 3-hit combos. Maybe 2-hit combos into super. Maybe a low forward fireball into super. A traditionally short combo fighting game, and it's Third Strike. Third Strike doesn't win being one of the funnest to watch fighting games because it's a combo-heavy game. It wins because of its visuals, its music, its weird and quirky characters, and its core mechanics that do a great job of making it just feel like a really satisfying game. So I would love to say something about Under Night, like Uniel and Eunice and whatever, but I just haven't played the game enough to know because the roster just never captivated me. But I can absolutely tell you the people that I know that grew up playing Third Strike all love Eunice. Like, they love those games. So I'm sure it's probably fan-fucking-tastic. It's just that I'm not gonna lecture you on something that I just know very little about. I've played so little of the game. But it seems that game has what fighting game players are looking for. And if it's a situation where you'd start toning things down, you're just affecting the long run. Like, your game is gonna be really exciting for the first couple of months, and then you're gonna lose people. So, players need, boiling it down, I'm gonna put it to, now the entire conversation is going to be boiled into a stew, and now it's a liquid I'm gonna serve it to you in a cup. Fighting game players need options. We need the option for things to be different, the option to go for more difficult things, the option to choose to go for limited stuff compared to high damaging things. Options are the most important things in fighting games, especially for players. So, I only hope that fighting games in the future don't limit the options of the players, instead try their hardest to give the players more options, more choices. We should be making choices in terms of what I want to be doing, as with my character. And that to me is the most important thing for the longevity of a fighting game. But I'll tell you right now, you want to sell units of Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe? This game sold like 4 million copies. You know why this game sold 4 million copies? Because Scorpion is fighting Batman on the cover. Scorpman is fighting Batman. That's why.